Yo, Vapor Man here. My next guest is actually into kayaking. You think you know a person. He also went into bat for us at last year's Tobacco Harm Reduction Senate inquiry. Good innings there, Doc. And the list just goes on and on and on. He's the founding chairman and director of the Australian Tobacco Harm Reduction Association, past vice president of the Australian Association of Smoking Cessation Professionals, on the committee that develops the Australian Smoking Cessation Guidelines, blah, 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 blah. Most importantly, and you can quote me on this, he is the best doctor in the world, Colin Mendelsohn. What's up, Doc?
You see, that's why I come on this show, Vapor Man. I know you're delusional, but no one else says that to me, so I enjoy it. It's very nice. Thank you.
Doc, it's my opinion. Everyone's allowed an opinion. In my opinion, you're the best doctor in the world. Let's jump into it. Okay, the first question is, there's been a media frenzy recently on youth vaping and disposable vaporizers in the black market. Even Vapor Man's getting a little bit worried. Should I be, Doc?
Look, it is very disturbing that there is such a black market which isn't being policed. I think the problem is not vaping. It's just that importers are bringing in shiploads of these disposable vaping devices, and retailers are selling them to young people unashamedly, and it's not being policed or enforced. And I think it's being exploited as a way of undermining vaping, to be honest. I mean, any other illicit product that was selling like this, these products come in for a couple of bucks and they're sold for $25. People are making huge amounts of money, quite illegally, and it's not good for the kids. That's for sure. Kids shouldn't vape, but no one's policing it. I mean, it's just crazy, and really someone needs to step up and deal with it.
Yep, just a follow-on question from that, Doc. Is it any more illegal to sell one of these disposable vaporizers to somebody without a prescription who's like 25, or is it the same amount of illegality to sell it to somebody who's 16?
Look, the sale is illegal, and I think in terms of penalties, I don't think there's any difference. So you can't sell nicotine legally in Australia unless you're a pharmacist now. Otherwise, any sale of any kind of nicotine liquid is illegal. And kids shouldn't vape, but I think there's been a huge beat up about the youth vaping epidemic. We know that actual vaping by kids who have never smoked is rare, and most of the kids who vape regularly are already smokers. And if anything, vaping is diverting more kids away from smoking than it's actually leading to smoking. So the whole thing is a huge beat up, but it needs to be enforced.
My next question comes from Reddit user Ouch78. They ask, can vaping cause IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, or if not, exacerbate underlying conditions that are attributed to IBS, i.e. blood in stools, bloating, cramps, etc.? Ouch78 is currently suffering this after they stopped smoking. What do you say, Doc?
Look, there's no question smoking can aggravate irritable bowel. So yes, it can lead to bloating and abdominal pain and mucus, but there's no evidence that vaping does that. So at this stage, we have to say no. But if he's having blood in the stools, that's not a symptom of irritable bowel, and that needs to be investigated. That certainly is an important red flag. So that's something quite different. But irritable bowel can be triggered by stress, and quitting smoking is stressful. So it could well be playing a role.
Yeah, definitely see your doctor if you do have blood in your stools, not just Ouch78, but everybody. The next question is, Black Shuck asks, or says, I've read of mouth ulcers when quitting cigarettes, not sure on the cause, but possibly related. I also want to add to that, I tried the nickel coils and I got some sort of welts in my mouth. I changed out the coils and I was fine. But what about mouth ulcers, Doc?
Yeah, mouth ulcers are definitely well documented as a side effect of quitting smoking. And it's probably due to the nicotine. And people who use nicotine patches and lozenges don't get mouth ulcers. So vaping should protect against that. I've not heard of anyone getting mouth ulcers from quitting vaping. So I think the nicotine's protecting them.
Okay, next question. A little birdie told me there are some nicotine vaping products available in pharmacy in this glorified prison colony of ours as of May. Is this true? And do you have any extra info you can share on pharmacies and nicotine and what it's going to look like going forward and past October 1st?
Yeah, look, so from early in May, pharmacies were allowed to dispense nicotine liquid. So they rely on certain doctors providing a special prescription. So doctors have to register to be authorised prescribers. And then the pharmacy can dispense commercial products, or they can actually compound it themselves, so make up the nicotine solutions themselves. The problem is, of course, that patients have to find a doctor who will write a script. They have to find a pharmacy that's willing to do this, and very few are, and there's only one or two that I know of at the moment that are set up for this. It's going to be more expensive because the pharmacies are going to put their markup on. There's going to be a smaller range of products. There's going to be no advice like we get from the vape shops. So look, it's another option, but it's also, there's a long way to go to make that work as well as we'd like.
And what about the quality on those products, Doc? Like, do you think the Australian pharmacies who do decide, if they're the limited pharmacies that are doing it or do decide to do it past October 1, do you think the quality is going to be any better than what you can order from, say, New Zealand?
Well, that's a good question, because the government has introduced a regulatory requirement for these products that are sold by pharmacies. So there are safety and quality standards for those products, not for the imported products, which, you know, is pretty ridiculous. The regulations they're introducing are fairly basic, excuse me, but it's a start. So there are some safety and quality requirements. So the products should be better on average.
October 1st is fast approaching, and in spite of misinformation put out by the TGA, do we need a prescription prior to October 1st? And do you have any intel on what's actually going to change regarding to prescriptions on that end of the doctor end of things, Doc?
Yeah, look, it's all a bit misleading because we've always required a prescription to import nicotine. That's nothing new. And the TGA says, oh, from the 1st of October, you'll have to have a script. Well, that's always been the case. The difference is that from the 1st of October, they're going to be enforcing the laws about importing nicotine without a prescription. So they're planning to intercept deliveries. If you don't have a prescription in the parcel that's being delivered, it'll be destroyed, and you may be asked to provide a prescription. So really the message is that from the 1st of October, patients should get, or vapers should get a prescription from their doctor, and they should send a copy to the vendor to send it back. But what do you think the fines will be if they catch you trying to import nicotine without a prescription? What would be a reasonable proportionate sort of fine, do you reckon?
For me personally, seeing as they sell cigarettes legally in this country, I don't think there should be any fine personally. Yeah. I mean, if you're importing like 1,000 milligram nicotine, I think that might be reasonable to come with some sort of fine because that is a dangerous product. If you're importing ready to mix stuff, nothing. In fact, the government should pay for postage as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that's a very kind perception of the
optimistic. Optimistic's the word.
Optimistic is the word, optimistic. Yeah. So the actual fine, and I checked the Customs Act today, and the legislation is up to $222,000.
Still.
Yeah. So importing an unapproved product that's prohibited is 1,000 penalty units, and each penalty unit's $222. So that's the maximum fine. Now, how they're going to allocate that to different order sizes, I don't know, but it shows that they're very serious about this. I don't know how they'll be able to intercept all the orders, but if you are caught, it could be potentially a big problem.
So, Doc, I guess I just want to reiterate, we've covered this before, but how do you get a prescription for nicotine? Or how's the best way?
Well, the best way is to get one from a doctor who's willing to prescribe it. Now, I only know of 7 or 8 doctors in Australia who are willing to do that. The TGA is funding some resources for doctors, but there'll be very little training. And given all the bad press and all the pressure doctors have been under not to prescribe nicotine, they've been told for years, oh, that's really dangerous. We can't have people using this poisonous stuff. They're generally opposed to it. That's the problem. So even when the laws change, I think we'll find a lot of doctors aren't willing to give those prescriptions. So on the ATHRA website, we do have a list of doctors who can provide that by telehealth, and I can do that too if people contact me. We can provide that script, but there'll be generally their own GPs will not be able to do it and not be willing to do it.
Links in this prescription, links in the description for that, and also I believe there may be something coming up later on this year. Keep tuned to Vaporman. I should be able to have some sort of easy, no fuss option, but we'll see if that pans out. I'm still repeating statistics from 2019. I like to be in the know, right? And Doc, you're a man in the know. You've forgotten more things than Vaporman will ever know in his entire life. Any updates or interesting new statistics that we should all know about?
Look, there's no new statistics that I can think of, but what's showing up increasingly in the evidence is that it's clearer and clearer that vaping is an effective treatment for smoking. It's more effective than other treatments. It's the most popular treatment in the world. There's no evidence of increasing harm from the studies that are being done. And we've now had, there are at least 1,000 peer-reviewed studies every year, and they've been very reassuring. The arguments about the gateway are getting weaker and weaker as we get more evidence, but health authorities are still refusing to accept the evidence, and that's the frustrating thing. We've got a Deputy Prime Minister now who's a smoker, and his partner is a vapor. So I'm hoping that Barnaby will have some influence on the debate. It's all very political.
And I guess one of the best things you can do as a vapor is get other people to vape, and also get other people to be active as well in this community, trying to push the politicians, and still contact your still contact your MPs, contact your GP, talk to them, try and get a prescription through them. Just keep pushing the message, guys. I mean, there's over 200,000 of us in this country. I mean, that's a lot of votes. If we make this a political issue, we'll be able to pick and choose which politicians we vote for. And if the election decides on it, this may be an issue. But it requires us to be vigilant and push that message out there. Right. Speaking of pushing messages out there, in a 2020 news article from the ABC with the headline, quote, metadata reveals medical charity ATHRA received assistance from PR company linked to vaping campaign, end quote, allegedly with ties to campaigns funded by tobacco. Your right of reply on that ABC story, Doc.
Yeah, look, this is another in the long string of smears against ATHRA and against me. It seems like some of the people in tobacco control can't believe that someone is advocating for vaping because it's an effective quitting method and it will improve public health. They're always looking for other explanations, and if you can't win on the evidence, you try and dig up all sorts of shit that will smear the opponent. So they're basically playing the man. And I'd love to have a debate with various people in tobacco control to discuss the evidence, but that's not the way they're not willing to do that. It's all about how can we undermine this campaign? It's all about winning and digging up information, feeding it to the media who lap it up, because there's nothing better than a good alarmist, sensational story against vaping. But yeah, there's no substance in that, and it's just another of these ad hominem attacks.
Yes, Vaporman is very familiar with the old ad hominem attack. I've gotten so used to it now, it doesn't even bother me. Yeah. You said under oath, I might add, that you made your way to the Tobacco Senate inquiry on your own dime after being berated by some senators at last year's Senate inquiry. Simon Chapman, one of these anti-vaping types, on the other hand, who in my opinion has profited greatly off tobacco taxes and thus tobacco sales over the years, however, was not berated by the senators. How and why does this double standard persist?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, look, all of my advocacy has been at my own expense. It's just something I'm passionate about, and I'm happy to spend my money supporting vaping. And as you say, Simon Chapman has been paid by indirectly by tobacco taxes. But of course, this is never mentioned. And a lot of the organisations that fight vaping have a vested interest, financially or otherwise. I mean, they're threatened by a new technology which they didn't think of and which can undermine their credibility. But they assume that anyone who opposes them is a tobacco shill, or otherwise it's a strategy to undermine people. But big organisations like the Cancer Council takes funding from Australia's biggest retailer of cigarettes. Now, if that's not a conflict of interest, I don't know what is. And they have organisations to support, they have conferences to run, they have staff to pay. For them, the end of smoking would be a problem. So they've decided, well, we'll turn our guns towards this new vaping thing and we'll try and discredit that, because it would undermine their role for sure and their influence.
Yep, if everybody quit smoking or switched to vaping, the government would lose $17 billion in tobacco tax revenue overnight, and a lot of these organizations would go bust. Speaking of smears and trying to, just throw things against the wall and see what sticks, I've been smeared in the media since we last spoke by some backwater rag called the Daily Telegraph. It was claimed that I, quote, flatly refused that vapes could harm, end quote. On multiple occasions, I claimed the exact opposite. Vaping is not safe. But the story claimed a 17-year-old had seizures due to a disposable Bang Bubblegum Ice vape. The proof was actually an anecdote, by the way, a hysterical mother's post on Facebook, and no other evidence was supplied or even hinted at. You're a doctor with many years of experience in this field, and I'm not talking about semiotics, by the way. Are there any cases of seizures due to any form of nicotine use? And is it, technically, in any way even possible via vaping?
Look, the first thing to say is you're a very erudite man, vapor man. I had to look up semiotics and I still don't understand it. But anyway, and the other thing is, being smeared by the Daily Telegraph is a badge of honour. So you must be having an impact. So well done. But look, that article was appalling journalism. There's no evidence that vaping can cause seizures. There's no evidence that smoking causes seizures. And they were relying on an emotional claim by a very upset mother who's naturally been frightened by what happened to her son. But the article quoted two vaping haters in the article itself. There was no opportunity for an independent pro-vaping expert to balance the information and to challenge it. I mean, and the advocates who were quoted made inflammatory comments and supported that misinformation, and that's disgraceful. If they'd interviewed me, I would have said, well, actually, it's almost certain that this young man has epilepsy, wasn't diagnosed, hasn't been diagnosed yet, or that maybe he was taking some other drug or there was some other cause. So I think to quote an upset mother as an evidence source is a big mistake, and you need balance in these articles. We approached the journalist. She wasn't at all interested. We took it to the Press Council. They rejected it as an issue. And there will be an article on alcohol and other drugs, Media Watch, shortly about that very article. So yeah, a very big concern.
Also, I just want to add, hypothetically, if you were to vape 1,000 milligram nicotine, that could conceivably give you a seizure, no?
Look, you can get seizures from nicotine overdose. If you have a whole bottle of nicotine, sure, you may, but most people who use nicotine titrate the dose against what their body needs. So you have a little bit, you have a little bit more, you have a bit more if you need it. If you have it too much, you'll get nauseous and you'll stop. So from vaping alone, it would be extremely hard to have a seizure. And there's no evidence it happens.
Okay, on the subject of vaping not being safe, I can't think of anything that is. I mean, if you stay in bed all day to avoid getting hit by a bus, a sedentary lifestyle isn't safe either. There are a lot of adult vapers out there who are concerned about teen vaping, especially with disposable vaporizers. We talked about it at the start of the interview, and rightfully so, in my opinion. Although far less harmful compared to smoking, vaping is still a risky behavior. But when it comes to teens and risky behavior, what's more risky, Doc? Vaping or drinking?
Yeah, look, that's an excellent point. We've got this obsession now about vaping, but in perspective, it's a relatively minor health risk. I mean, of course, kids shouldn't be vaping, but we know they're going to, and they're going to engage in a whole lot of risky behaviours. Now, but you're absolutely right that binge drinking, drink driving, illicit drug use, unprotected sex, they're all much more common and much more risky. And, we've just lost perspective, lost proportion. And I think partly it's being exploited by the vaping haters. This is clearly an emotional issue. We've got to protect the children. We've got to protect the children, but we're not going to stop them from importing or selling these illegal products. But, it's really not the big issue that it's being made out to be. And you're absolutely right. Kids do a lot worse things than this.
It's like teenagers, you tell them not to do something, they're going to do it. It's the time of life when you're experimenting. Do you remember what you were like when you were a teenager, Doc? I was a little terrorist. I was doing all sorts of stupid stuff that I'm not going to put on camera and on the internet to admit that I did. I didn't smoke, however. I started smoking when I was 21. Last question, Doc. Are the upcoming changes in October the end when it comes to vaping and laws in Australia?
Look, absolutely not. I know we'll win this debate. This is just another step in the journey, which Greg Hunt feels he has to have. Further change will come about with what you talked about earlier, which is getting enough political pressure to make the change. The change is political. We need vapers to step up. Where are all the vapers when it comes to advocacy? There's a few keen ones, and like you doing a fantastic job, but the vast majority are missing in action. And they're going to pay the price sooner or later if this isn't turned around. They're going to have these penalties and these extra hassles of prescriptions and so on, which need to be dealt with. We need a vaping advocacy organisation, because anyone listening, we need to get a group of vapers together advocating. We have had that in the past. Every other country has one. So that's one thing. We need a vape industry organisation to advocate. We need public education. We need more responsible media to sort of push the message. But things will definitely change, but it's up to us. And I think the benefit of change too is that there are 3 million smokers out there. Up to 2 in 3 are going to die from smoking. And, I think we have a responsibility to bring them along as well.
And in Vaporman's opinion, it's a bigger issue than even COVID-19. 21,000 Australians die this year from smoking, according to government statistics. It doesn't even come close to that with COVID-19. So we're putting all this effort and energy into COVID-19. And meanwhile, the issue of smoking, teen vaping is a bigger issue than the 21,000 people dying. No. And I'm not saying vaping is a magic bullet that's going to stop everybody from smoking. But hey, it worked for me and it worked for a lot of people. And I know people who started vaping and then stopped vaping because of the stuff they see in the media, which are lies, demonstrably. Sorry to end it on that note.
No, well, can I just jump in there? Because you raised a good point about COVID. Look how the government accelerated the use of the COVID vaccine with months of research. And yet we've had 15 years of clinical use in the community and many years of clinical studies and evidence, and they won't accept that. They'll say, but we don't know what's going to happen in the future. Well, we don't know what's going to happen with those COVID vaccines in the future either, but we're willing to use them because of the risk of not using them. The risk is much greater with smoking. We lose 8 million people every year in the world from smoking, a much bigger problem than COVID, but different standards.
Yeah, I think we just got to get some spray cans or something and go and spray up the Cancer Council or the government buildings or whatever happened in the 80s, because this exact same situation is happening now.
Exactly.
Doc, you're a legend. You are the best doctor in the world, and I don't care how modest you are. That's my opinion, Doc. Sue me if you want to. That's my thoughts. What do you got coming up? Anything interesting? Got any kayaking trips coming up?
No, nothing exciting. I think we've got a lot of work to do in the vaping area over the next few months. I'm trying to educate medical people about it, writing some articles and giving webinars for doctors and other health professionals, because we've got to get them on board. This whole thing's going to fall apart, which I think it will anyway. So that's my plan. Unfortunately, with COVID, we can't do much about. I can't go kayaking and we can't go away on holidays, and we can focus on other things in the meanwhile like that.
Well, Doc, if you ever need Vaporman's help for anything, just give me a bell. If you don't know, now you know!